and welcome back. We're moving on now to part three of week 9. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at presenting in English and essays because essentially this is where we are going. So for your final test, this is what we're aiming for, basically. So what I'd like to do first is to start with the presentation skills, and then we'll talk about them further in a little while. So presentation skills, basically, they follow the same pattern as what we've been working on with paragraphs, but what we do is we open up that pattern. So we start with an introduction, the same. So presenting, just to be clear, is when you create a presentation, for example, with a PowerPoint to give in front of your classmates in class or, online also, of course, these days. So your presentation skills, basically, you follow the same pattern. This is what I'm trying to establish this pattern for, is to show you that it's not only practical, it's not only useful for, smaller projects like a paragraph, but it's also really useful for bigger projects like a presentation. So we follow the same pattern. So we use an introduction to start with. Now the introduction, the important point, again, I'm not sure if you remember, but it's to establish your 5 W's. So who, what, where, when, why, and possibly you have a how much, how many, how often, something like that. So you need to choose your important W's. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to focus on what information it is that you want to give. So for example, if you write about an interview, then the important information is what did you do and with whom. So if you did an interview, then that would be part of the information you should be giving. Also, you want to define who it was that you interviewed. So in the case of, for example, if you give a presentation on a trip that you have been on, then you want to talk about what it is you're talking about, which is the trip, and where you went. Possibly you want to add who you went with and when you went on that trip. So these are the important question words that we need to focus on when we're answering, when we're thinking about how to introduce the topic that we're discussing. So the same as when we're writing a paragraph, when you're giving a presentation in English, I suggest also in Korean that the most important feature is for you first to introduce your topic as a general topic. What are you talking about and why? Next, so I'm going to move on now to slide 23. So the next step, of course, the same as in a paragraph, is the development. Okay, so we have our general topic. So what, out of all of the possible things that we could talk about related to this topic, what are you going to talk about? And you introduce your 1, 2, 3 details. So after you've got your details and you've decided on what to do, the most important point for you to focus on for presentation and for writing is a balance. So if, for example, you spend 3 minutes giving an introduction, then how long would you give talking about your detail 1? I'm hoping you said 3 minutes, because what we want is a balance. And then, are you ready for it? How long would you talk about detail 2? I'm hoping you said 3 minutes as well. And the same is also true then for detail 3. And what comes after detail 3 again? Oh yeah, the conclusion. So in this case, for the development, I've given you your 3 important details. So the balance is the key important point. The same amount of time, the same number of sentences is what we're looking for. For our paragraphs, we're using 2 sentences for each point. So for example, if your introduction is 2 sentences, detail 1 should be 2 sentences, detail 2 should be 2 sentences, and 2 sentences also for detail 3. So moving on to slide 24, of course, don't forget the conclusion. Now, many of you want to skip over the conclusion, but You must have it. I'm sorry. Especially in a presentation, because for a presentation, one of the points I've noticed for many students, not simply, Korean students or English as second language learners, but for many people when they present, how do you finish? It's really hard to communicate the idea to people without saying, okay, I'm finished, bye, which sounds unnatural and it's awkward. So how to end your presentation effectively and practically and simply is by restating what your original topic was. So in this way, we communicate to the audience that we are finishing. We are almost at the end of our presentation. So the next long pause will indicate you are finished, and then all of the audience will clap for you. You don't need to say, I'm done, I'm finished, the end. Those are unnatural ways to finish a presentation. People are there, they're human, they can see when you have finished if you are clear in your delivery. So for your conclusion, you restate the important information, and this again shows that you're at the end. So remember that the skill that you want to show for your conclusion is that you're using different words. You're using different vocabulary to communicate the same idea. Now, another way you can do this is that you can structure the sentence with the same information, but reposition the sentence. For example, so if I want to say, I did an interview with my friend Jisoo Kim, at the end, I can say, Jisoo Kim's interview was really fun. And there you have two sentences which communicate the same information, but I've moved the sentence around so they sound different even though they're not 100% different. So there are a variety of ways for you to deal with this problem. The other thing too is please don't forget that balance. Something else that I've been noticing with students is they write, for example, a one-sentence introduction and then 4 sentences detail 1, 4 sentences detail 2, 4 sentences detail 3. They are not unrelated. So if you're going to do 4 sentences for your details, how many sentences will you have to do for your introduction? 4. What about your conclusion? 4. So the idea for this is we're working with 2 sentences so that it's not too complex. But it is complex enough for university students because, of course, when you're giving presentations and when you're writing, you need to be showing that your skill level is university level. It is an academic level. So please be careful. Please remember that giving any presentation in English has the same basic pattern as when you're writing. I think this also works in Korean, but I'm not Korean and I'm not fluent by any means. So when I watch presentations in Korean, it does seem to differ. There are some differences, and anyways, for English, definitely this works. In Korean, I suggest this would work really well, but it's up to you. Now, what we're going to discuss next is complex, okay? And this is where we're moving to for the final part of our semester, is we're going to talk about essays, because you are going to write essays. Yay! Now, the point about essays is that we're not starting them today. So I'm saying right now, as a warning, relax, okay? Don't worry, because what we're going to talk about for essays today is just an introduction to the idea. So we will not be writing essays today. So take it easy, take it easy. So what I want to do is I'm moving on now to slide 26. And what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about how to move from the paragraph to the essay. So it's a really important skill for you to learn how to write essays, because essentially in English, an essay is a basic writing format for academic level. So if a paragraph is 10 sentences, then an essay would be 50 sentences. So essentially, this is where we're moving to. Now, I can hear already, no. But take it easy, because the reason why I'm saying this is that because we have a pattern to follow, it makes this much easier to deal with. So if we think about 50 sentences right away, no, it's too much, no, 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 no. But if we think about it as separate paragraphs, then we can see them in separately as sentences. So the whole point of this is that we have a regular introduction paragraph, okay? So that's our regular 10 sentences with 2 sentences introduction, 2 sentences detail 1. How many sentences for detail 2? 2 sentences, good. Detail 3? 2 sentences. Conclusion? 2 sentences. So that's our 10 sentences. Now the key to this is your details. So if, for example, I choose the 3 details of, perhaps I'm talking about a trip or some trips that I've taken. So I talk about a trip that I took in China, I talk about a trip that I took to Jamaica, and I talk about a trip that I took to Laos, okay? So these will be my 3 introduction details. But now I'm going to explain why these 3 are important. So what happens with an essay is basically we take that first detail and we make a paragraph out of that detail. So I'm going to introduce my topic of China, and that's going to become my introduction topic. And then I'm going to give 3 details about the trip I took in China. So perhaps I'll talk about when I went to 3 different cities in China. I went to Beijing, I lived in Shanghai, and I also went to Dali, because I really like Dali. So these will be my new 3 details for my China paragraph, okay? And then my second, so this is now my 3rd paragraph, my second detail paragraph, okay, don't get worried, is I'm going to now talk about my trip to Jamaica. So in Jamaica, I'm going to talk about 3 places or 3 things I did in Jamaica that I really liked. So perhaps I'll talk about a resort that I went to, and I'll talk about jerk chicken, because jerk chicken's a really spicy, yummy, yummy Jamaican food. And I'll talk about the disco that we went to. We went to this dance one night. So those are my 3 details for Jamaica. So now I have a general introduction paragraph, a paragraph about my detail 1 China, a paragraph about my detail 2 Jamaica, and can you guess what my paragraph 3 paragraph is going to be about? It's going to be about Laos. So now I'm going to talk about 3 places or 3 things I did in Laos that were awesome. For example, I went to an amazing temple in Laos, and I want to talk about maybe their national tree, the plumeria, which is one of my favorite trees. And I'd talk about perhaps a pizza restaurant I went into in Laos because the food was really good. Strange but true. So now I have my 4 paragraphs written, a general paragraph about trips that I'm taking and 3 places I went to, talking about the first place I went to in more detail, talking about China, talking about the second place, Jamaica, in more detail, talking about the 3rd place, Laos, in more detail. So what's the 5th paragraph going to be like? This is going to be my conclusion, and it's going to be very, very similar to my introduction paragraph, but not the same. Because if it's the same, it shows you have low skill in vocabulary and that you are copying. It's going to be boring. So what you want to do is write a very similar paragraph, the same information, but different words. So hopefully that's just the general idea of where we're moving to for the end of this semester. So I'm hoping that that's relatively clear for you. Again, if you have any questions, don't be shy, send an email. My email is sarkley@hotmail.com, or the Golbengi is in English is at hotmail.com. I can't access my GNUE email still, so please send to my Hotmail 100%, okay? So I'm going to move on now to interviews and presenting in English. So what I'd like to do is take a look at slide 28. So what we're going to do is we're going to be looking again at questions and question skills for interviewing. So what I want you to do is think about open open questions and closed questions, okay? So if you remember, can you remember what an open question is? And I'll give you a hint. So an open question begins with the 5 W's, okay? And a closed question, it begins with a verb, okay? So if you remember, I'm hoping you remember. So my first question is, in conversation, which is first? Now I'm going to separate this. So if you want to find facts, like you want to find out whether this is true or false for somebody, should you ask an open question or a closed question? So for example, I want to know about, I have a student here, Chewan, and I say, oh, Chewan, you alcohol drink? What's the correct question? Good. So I'm hoping you answered, do you drink alcohol? Because the first thing I need to establish is yes or no. And then I can ask more questions about her answer. If you remember, those are called follow-up questions. So what we want to do is to find facts, we ask a closed question. So so let's take it from another point of view. Chewan is here and I say, how much beer do you drink? Maybe Chewan hates alcohol. So I hate alcohol. So the first step has to be to establish, does she drink alcohol or not? Okay. And in English, remember, you just say drink. Do you drink or not? So to establish facts, it's best to start with a closed question. So why? Can you figure out why? Good. I'm hoping that you figured out that this is the starting point that we can move from. So if Chewan says yes, then I can ask questions about alcohol and, what do you like to drink, or where do you like to drink, or who do you drink with? If, however, she says no, then I have to take a different path of questions and ask, oh, why don't you like to drink? And, what do you do for fun? When you go out, where do you go? These kinds of questions. So the most important point is it gives you a starting point for the rest of the conversation. But if you want to find just some information about somebody, then we begin with open questions. So our open questions are good when we want to just get people's thoughts, people's opinions about things. All right, so I'm moving on now to slide 29. And I want to give some examples to show what I'm talking about. So my first one is to talk about facts. So in this case, I ask Chewan, I say, how often do you smoke? This implies I know Chewan smokes, but Chewan probably does not smoke. So if I say, do you smoke? Then we start. Yes, I do. No, I don't. Then I can start asking questions once I know if she smokes or not. So question 2 is about question 1's answer. Do you smoke? No, I don't. Oh, I could ask another closed question, or I can ask, oh, why don't you smoke? Or, do you not like smoking? Something like that. So once again, the questions about the answers are called follow-up questions. So moving on now to further examples. So for example, if you drink, so remember that in English as well as drink means alcohol. I seem to be focused on bad habits today, smoking and drinking. Anyways, do you drink? I asked Chewan, and Chewan says, yes, I do. So now I can ask questions related to that because I know she drinks alcohol. Do you drink, meaning other regular drinks, is unusual because everybody drinks something. So drink is usually focused on alcohol in English. So I can ask questions like, oh, really? Oh, how much do you drink? Or what do you like to drink? Do you like to drink somek or soju or beer or what? If, however, she answers, I say, do you drink? And she says, no, I don't. I hate alcohol. Then I can start to ask questions related to that. Oh, really? Oh, why do you hate alcohol? And she can explain, oh, when I was young, I watched my friend and she drank too much alcohol and blah, 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 blah. So we get some interesting stories and we have interesting conversations based on the first questions that we ask. Okay, moving on. So that's our starting point. Now what I'm going to talk about is when we interview, thinking about tenses. So the most important point that I'm trying to establish here is the questions and the answers should match. So traditionally, when you write a paragraph, you should use one tense throughout the paragraph. But problems can occur when we start to talk about different or use different tenses. So I just want to show you that it's possible to do that as long as you're keeping it in one area. So what I want to do first, though, is I want to talk briefly about tenses. So I'm starting by looking on page 32. So if you look on page 32, sorry, I'm afraid of spiders, and I thought I just felt a spider web. Ew. So the most important point about the tenses is that whatever question tense you're asking in, and you should be thinking about it as you're making the questions, the answer should match. So if you hear the question, you should match the tense. And the same goes, is that whenever you're asking and you're listening for the answers should match your question. So what I've done here is I've given you 3 pictures because I like pictures, and I think that depending on the students learn in different ways. So especially for young learners, for like elementary level students, I like pictures better than words because they tend to have less focus than we do. I'm hoping that you're still focusing, that's why I'm giggling. Anyways, so I've got these 3 pictures. Can you figure out what tenses these reflect? So I'm thinking from the point of view of questions in this case. So in the first one, we've got do you. So if you think about it in English, we've got do you like to go to movies? Do you like to go to the cinema? Do you drink? Do you use a cell phone? Do you like this? So that's why I'm using this picture is the do you. The middle picture is the baby. And I thought this was hilarious that the poor baby, they drew eyebrows on, but I thought it was really, really cute. So when you were a cute little baby, when was that? That was in the past. Okay, so something that happened before and is finished. Are you a baby now? No, so it is finished. In the third picture, I was thinking about the future. So in the future, when you meet somebody, if you haven't already, probably you'll get married, and maybe not, I don't know. But anyways, my idea for this is the future. So we've got the present, the past, and the future. Basically, I'm just making sure that you are clear about what tenses are available to use. So I'm moving on now to the next slide. And again, we're looking at the tenses. So we've done our regular 3. Now, these 2 are a little bit more perhaps difficult to use. Many students find them more difficult to use, but don't stress, it's not a big deal. So you've got the black box, you're reading this right now. How do we define right now in English? And we've got how long have you been? So you're reading this right now. This implies something that is right now and continuing. So we call this the present continuous. And, have you PP is something that you have done before and maybe you'll do again. So how long have you been in London? I have been here since Monday, and maybe I'll be here tomorrow and the next day as well. So what I wanted to start with is just to make sure everyone is clear about how to organize questions and what they mean when you use the tenses and these tense forms in questions. So closed questions, first of all, we're looking again with our pictures. So we have the do you. So do you implies usually, normally, and now. So if we want to imply now, it usually means we usually use it with the to be verb. So are you? So are you happy? Are you sick? So it implies now. Normally is usually the do you format. So, do you like movies? Do you like horror movies? Do you like action movies? This idea. It's really creeping me out. The second case, we've got did you past tense. So did you implies something that you did before, but it's finished. So you are not doing that now. It is over. That's the main point. The wedding picture, we have will you, which implies something in the future. So will you go to the store after this video? Will you eat a snack after this video? Will you take a nap after this video?